Okay, I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. We'll start with a roll call. McKee here. Bottom. Barenkamp.
Here.
Nichols.
Here.
And Planning Commission Lind.
Here.
Brumman.
Here.
And Hargreaves.
Yes. Here.
And Langerman.
Here.
Perfect. So we will just jump right into the main item for the work session, which is the rural, commercial, and industrial zoning. And Natalie will be taking it from here.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The item before the Planning Commission and City Council tonight is drafts that address Task 1 and Task 2 of our commercial industrial update. So specifically, Task 1 is evaluating and clarifying the use and or assignment of development rights within the rural commercial, CR, and transitional rural commercial, TCR zoning districts. Task 2 is evaluating whether the city wants to remove mini storage and self-storage as a use within the city or add standards to limit where the use is located. Also to keep in mind, if we have time after reviewing these drafts, we can also start work on Task 3, which is the more comprehensive, larger review of all our commercial and industrial zoning districts, including our mixed-use zoning districts. So based on the Planning Commission feedback that was presented to Council on April 25th, the direction was to prepare a draft for Task 1 that memorializes the historic use of development rights within the rural commercial and transitional rural commercial zoning districts. Staff was also directed to move forward with a survey that would be open to anyone, but mailed invitations would be specifically sent out to those who live within 500 feet of our rural commercial area. And that's to get further feedback from the public on the explored changes to lot sizes and how it relates to development rights. So staff is currently working on that survey. A huge effort is being done to get that ready for Friday, for that to be mailed out and available on our website as of Friday. And then Task 2, the direction was to go ahead and remove the mini storage and self-storage from the applicable zoning districts in the city. And also staff was directed to complete some research as to the self-storage in the city, both approved and existing, as compared to Greenfield, Rogers, and Medina. So that table is provided in the work session memo. One of the interesting findings were about, I believe it was 54 gross acres of mini storage, 58. Which is, and then when you combine the gross acreage in the 3 surrounding
59.
cities, we exceed that, their number combined. So we do have a significant amount of storage comparatively. And other than that, the drafts do as directed, and we'd love to get your feedback, everyone's feedback, to figure out how we can move forward.
Perfect. Thank you. So I think we'll start with that first task and open it up to maybe council first and then commission, and then we can kind of see where the conversation goes, if there's any thoughts, changes, like what we're seeing on that first task. Or I'm sorry, on Task 2, Task 1, Natalie's, that, did you need anything really from us right now? It's survey.
Yep. More, I would say, kind of survey. Is this doing what we wanted? I did do a couple minor changes just to some obvious uses that needed to get addressed. That just maximizing staff time there. Mm-hmm. But is there anything else glaring? Is this the direction that we are leaning towards and should continue preparing for? How exactly do we want to proceed for Task 1 and Task 2?
Okay. One miscellaneous thought I had for the survey, I don't know if it's doable in that time frame or doable at all, but maybe getting something on the sign up front.
Oh, sure.
Just like we have with planning commission openings and stuff like that. So yeah. I don't know if it's a QR code or just say go to our website or something. Yeah, maybe not a QR code because then people will be driving and trying to take a picture of it, which probably isn't good.
Dodging graders.
If only we could keep the
cement trucks.
Keep the fees that the police.
Yeah.
So those days are
set them up for it.
Yeah. Really important.
So besides that,
yeah.
Facebook, everything.
Yep.
Yes, we are working with communications to make it as visible as possible.
I had a hunch you were already on that. So.
And then maybe if we mentioned in the
Yeah.
letters that we're sending out to the 500, if we
I
have
want
a
to
link
show
or something
that
so that we
one
can
too, Lon.
tell people, tell their neighbors, or just, I'm just trying to think of other ways to
Sure.
get as big of a reach as possible.
Okay.
Just like a
On
link
what?
saying, so like if I'm within 500 feet and I get a physical copy, excuse me, copy
Oh,
of the survey.
you're not talking about the opening for the planning commission, you're talking about the survey for.
Talking about the survey, yeah. Yeah, just so that then they could go to their friend and say, oh, if you want to take it, you can go to this website.
Yeah, okay.
Try to spread it out.
I also want something on the messaging board, so we'll talk about that.
Or if we can, just an idea.
I think we can, it'll be open for 3 weeks, it's a quick turnaround, because I had promised that we would have findings for you for the June meeting,
Mhm.
so,
Yeah,
it'll be a
if it
quick
finds,
collection.
if it's doable and it finds one extra person, great. But other than that, I think we're good on task 1 for now. Does anyone
I
else?
have a thought on
Yeah.
task 1. Do we feel like 500 feet is sufficient? And I say, and maybe this shouldn't be drawn in parallel, but, you know, we had some feedback from residents around not getting notified about PUDs and
Mhm.
about preliminary plats and proposed, you know, it not being a wide enough range
Mhm.
for the amount of impact it could have. So I didn't know if we felt like that number is appropriate or if we want to talk about it.
Well, certainly something we can talk about. What it was for us for the longest time up until not too long ago, it was 350. We upped it to 500, which is, a lot of cities have 350, which is the statutory minimum. I've seen a number of cities up it to about 500. I haven't seen too many go beyond 500.
No, it's typically 500, because you're always gonna have people saying they didn't receive the notice even when they did receive
Yeah.
the notice. And the development signs are another way that we try to reach those who aren't looking in the mail and who may not have received a mailed
And
notice.
social and
So I think and then our website also has continuous updates as to what applications we're reviewing and what has a public hearing coming up, and our public hearing notices are also posted on the board. So we do have multiple methods to get the word out there. I would say 500 feet that's typically what cities will choose to increase it to, and I haven't seen it go beyond that.
yeah.
Right now, our fee is part of the fee is counting the publication and printing mailer costs for
Right.
those public hearing notices. So if we were to increase it again by double, because we already increased it almost double
Right.
with the change. If we were to increase it by another double, we really would need to first do a fee study to
Mhm.
make sure that we're collecting the right amount of fees, or change our practice so that it gets charged directly to the escrow, which I've seen be done as well, so.
Area increases by 4 when you increase radius by 2, so.
Correct.
Fair enough.
Such
It's
a-
200
Such a Jeremy comment.
It's 210 feet from right here to the road, just FYI, to give it some context.
Yeah, I'm only thinking of, maybe experience with, County Road 30, 116, because there were neighborhoods that were like, we didn't get notified because we're not within that radius, but it's a big deal. And maybe a compromise could be, we mark the date on the sign that it's gonna be evaluated, not that it's gonna be under commission, or, you know, it's gonna be under review, but like what day? Because I'm
Okay.
sorry, if I'm a regular resident, I'm not checking the website unless I remind myself,
Right.
you know, amongst all the other things in life. So I'm just, maybe I get the fee thing, we need to, you know, honor the budget. That was feedback I heard,
Yeah.
especially with like the traffic impact that it has for people, and just how big of a deal some of these are for
Yeah.
our residents, that it just, what we're hearing is it didn't get out enough.
Especially in the rural areas, 500 feet doesn't seem like very far at all.
Well, so what I would like to clarify is, are you talking specifically about the survey, or are you talking about notice for all things?
Yeah, it's a good.
Um, because the survey in this rural commercial, transitional commercial, rural, I could see perhaps a reason why you'd go more than 500. Some of these plots are gonna be contained, they would be noticing themselves,
Mhm.
right? But I also think that that's where we have a responsibility as, you know, representatives, people who serve to spread the word. I know every time that when there was a survey about the sign, I was texting all my neighbors, and so maybe that's just me, but, you know, we also can say, hey, pay attention to this, hey, this is what's going on. But I guess the question I have for clarification is, are you talking specifically about this survey, or are you talking about every instance of notice?
Yeah, because I'll just, so I believe the request is for every notice, but I think the conversation tonight, we should get a finalized answer on how we would like the survey. At this point, staff is prepared to get mailed notices out for 500 feet and 1,000 feet does double the staff effort for that.
At what point does I'm just throwing it out there, like, how far away do people have the right to weigh in on something also? Like, if there's something going on 1,000 feet from your property that may or may not impact it, it depends on what it is. Like, how much say do they get to have in the matter too? That's something I think that should.
Well, and if we increase it to 1,000, the people at 1,200 feet are gonna ask whether to increase.
No, I get it. That's what
Yeah, so give
I'm
us-
only throwing it out there, like, I don't have an opinion on that, I'm just,
Yeah.
something to consider.
And two things to consider for the survey, in contrast to an application, which is just one evening. The survey is going to be open for a period of time and to anyone that wants to apply.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring that up
Yeah.
and multiple ways that information we're trying to, so
And I would
definitely to get that out.
encourage
And then the other thing that I was here that evening when a lot of folks said that they didn't get the word, but they were there because somebody got them the word. And so to the point that was made by Commissioner Brummond, I think we do our best to get the word out, and then people who recognize, hey, my neighbor needs to know about this. Part of the reason a lot of people were there wasn't because they got mailers, it was because people who had their best interest in mind said, hey, I think this is of interest to you. And I think that's an even more effective way to activate people to get them to come in than a flyer that they throw away.
And I think that's fine. I think perhaps for the survey, it's sufficient. I know I brought this feedback before and it was, let's bring it up at this meeting,
Yeah.
so that's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, no, I
Thank
think
you.
it's fair, and I think I do think it's a good question, I just think that there's, at what point, I think, does it kind of just do we keep expanding the radius, I think is the
I
question.
think it just needs to be larger than
Yeah.
it is. It's just, I don't think it's.
For everything, Lindsay, or just for this
For
specific thing?
PUDs and like larger impact projects.
How would you
Not for the
define,
survey, so
how would
we
you
can-
define a larger impact project?
I don't know.
So if it's like houses on houses, or industrial on houses, like there's
Yeah.
so many,
Different
like,
variables.
I'm glad you're taking it seriously. I don't know how we would define whether we do 1,000 or 500. I'm totally open to
And if
a
you go-
definition.
If you go back to Hope Church, there was people that were 3/4 of a mile away. I didn't get
Yeah, and,
notified.
I mean,
And
maybe-
and I just told them, did you see the blue sign? Yeah. Did you read it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's information, go on our website. You can
Yeah.
dig into that specific deal. That's what the sign is for and stuff. I experience it all the time with people. I didn't know. Well, why are you calling me then? Well, somebody told me. It gets
Michelle,
out.
do you know if-
How much money are we gonna
This is-
spend to do this?
If this
Yeah.
would be possible, so you know how we have on our website the agendas for planning, parks, charter and us? And people can subscribe to that. Is there a way we could do that same type of thing where our notices go out on that page and people can subscribe on there? And they
Like
auto
maybe
get
a
it
tab
mailed
that has like where the blue sign's gonna be, kind of something like
Yeah.
that. Along with the letter and then information about that project.
Right, and so they'd all go on there, and then if if people were concerned about notices of that type going out in the community, they could hit that subscribe and enter their email, and anytime anyone in the city goes out, it auto emails to them.
Well, right now, the project page provides some really great information that Dwight's updating regularly. It might be as simple as if there's any associated meetings with it, linking it to that. Thoughts on that, Henry? Like if we have an upcoming, it's gonna be on this agenda.
It does list the
Yeah,
meeting
so
date.
it links to it or lists the dates.
Come on.
Okay.
I think the advantage to Tom's proposal, though, is it's a push. Doesn't rely on somebody going to the projects page to be aware of what's going on.
It's a push after someone initially goes to the
Right.
page.
Yeah, and then somebody can unsubscribe if they get tired of getting the
Right.
pushed info.
Which they probably will, but at least then it's on them.
We could talk about that and figure out a way to do
Yeah,
that.
that should be a good delivery solution.
Sounds good.
We hear it too, like, nobody ever told us that. And then sometimes I'll say, well, it's been on the council agenda for like a year. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to forget that.
Like unless
Most
I
people
come to your
aren't
house
as-
and knock and say, hey, we're thinking,
Yeah.
a half mile down the road, we're thinking about letting someone put a new barn in.
Right.
Thank you for hearing me out. Sorry if I derailed.
No.
You did
No,
good.
You
No,
you
I-
railed,
Oh, sorry.
that's what we're here
Good
for
I
question.
today.
think it, yeah.
Are you looking for additional feedback on task one?
Sure.
Or no?
Sure, if you have it.
I had one. I think we're doing council.
Jeremy,
first.
and then-
Sorry.
No, go for it.
One thing that I wanted to suggest is we talked about trying to figure out how to incorporate agriculture in some of these parcels. We added it to transitional rural commercial, but not to rural commercial. I'm thinking that's because the intent isn't to keep rural commercial as an open farm field, but maybe we would want to consider adding vertical agriculture as a permitted use to enable some component if somebody was looking for a place to site, a vertical farm for tomatoes or that sort of thing.
My only concern with that is the water usage that would entail. So I think maybe it'd be good for me to get some feedback on whether that's something that would be typical for a well versus, I think that vertical farming, it definitely makes sense within the MUSA, but my understanding is they're fairly water intensive. So I just want to make sure that it'd be a compatible use
a fair
with
question.
limited water.
You could look into it.
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
think
think
we'd
it's
all
worth
be
definitely
interested.
worth.
Won't that be addressed by the watershed anyways? So like if it, as a city, we don't need to necessarily harp on it because the watershed is gonna be all over water
Right.
use.
Might be more, would a well be sufficient to actually just,
And, yeah,
irrigate the
making sure the
crops.
uses make sense, because it's in our district, it specifically says the intent of this district is for uses that will not require municipal water or municipal sewer. So if it really is a use that would be water intensive, it wouldn't make sense to have it specifically in that district.
Sure.
So, but I
Yeah.
think, to your point, I think it's definitely something we could look into.
take a look at it. I
that's
think if it's something we could do, I'd be open to it.
I think someone asked at some point that we make all of our areas available to farming and ag, like no matter what. We don't disallow farming as a major use in any area of our town.
Correct, so anything that doesn't currently have a use in the rural commercial would have previously been an agricultural use, so they can continue
Oh, okay.
they can continue operating. It's just when it gets developed, it's really not developed for agriculture use.
But someone
longer.
could come in and
Yeah.
do it if they wanted to. The spirit moved them.
Not in the rural commercial. I did want to add it back into the transitional rural commercial because I think it would make sense to allow for someone to expand, because there's still, with the nonconformity, there is still some limitations when it's a nonconforming use. So
Didn't you ask for that, Corinne?
Did I ask for farming in every capacity?
Yeah, in most areas, I thought that you
No, I asked, but it would undo 50 years of work. I asked for zone agriculture would be ultimately, just so that you're preserving a component of land in every suburb or, outer concentric circle of the metro maintains some sort of an agricultural,
Okay.
so that food can get to our cities without costing an arm and a leg. But then it was explained by Kendra and Natalie quite well that ultimately that was done away with in the 1980s when the development rights was established.
Okay.
And so there is some ag land that's being managed by higher levels of government, but not zoned as parts of most cities.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have a lot of land that is zoned in one of those districts that is currently being farmed and could continue to do that for 50 years if they wanted to, probably, depending on where they are in the city.
Right, my biggest thing was like, we're leaving it up to the landowner to choose, rather than the city saying this is a valuable
I see what you're saying.
zoning regular, right?
Yep.
And so as soon as the landowner changes, or the landowner says this isn't important anymore, and what ultimately is happening is that we push our small, like our farmer's market folk, eventually, as gas prices soared, the summer of 2020, 2021, it wasn't valuable for them to drive their produce because they couldn't sell it at a price that would make up for the gas they were spending to get it here, right? And so we're in this place where we can still try to do some things to preserve that rather than push it out, right? Like everything from the metro has kind of done is just pushed it farther and farther out. So it was just an attempt to say, what can we creatively do differently in the development of our city that maintains or retains some component of an ag business, because it's, foundational to the way our society works to eat.
Yeah.
An agrihood.
Right, that's, yeah.
It's allowed now.
Okay, anything else on task one?
My oh, I'm sorry,
No, I
because
think-
you guys get the right of way.
I am now done.
You're good?
But you.
I'm done too, so I appreciate you guys chiming in. We're
My-
we're on equal footing here.
My only thought regarding, like, I think that the layout is fantastic. I appreciate that we're getting some of the feedback, because I would hate to, think I was representing folk in those areas if they were actually desirous of something other, than what my initial feeling is. The only thing that I have ultimately as a concern is that because this is not even showing up on the 2050 comp plan for the city, right? So it's even farther than that out. We really need to think about the impact of whatever decision we make today on what eventually will be the development of that area. And I just think that is the struggle that we're feeling with this area here in 10, just south of 10. And I think it was developed prior to MUSA being here, right? And so the sort of like the grow house area, the gas station, that stuff. And I think that oftentimes, there needed to be, like, there's buildings that are unable to be used because they're not compliant with current code. There's, as they switched from locations because they wanted to be bigger. And so I just think about the snowball effect on a later time frame that it might have if all of a sudden we surged ahead in higher density before we had a greater vision of what that area was gonna look like more specifically. So that's my only, I guess, thought, is I lean less towards some of the latter options regarding development rights. It feels like maintaining, but clarifying feels like the way where landowners really get to choose how those development rights are used and what plots they are. Kind of the mid options seem really a little bit more restrictive, not necessarily permissive. So anyway, but that third option where we're increasing the density fourfold feels like premature without a greater vision for what we want that area to really look like.
Makes sense. Appreciate that. Any other thoughts?
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, for the survey mailed invitation, are we doing 500 feet or 1,000 feet?
I think we said the 500, given that that's kind of what we're set up for, and then with these other supplemental ways and trying to get it out to
Okay.
as many people as possible.
Corinne, can you please clarify the increasing the density fourfold? Where's that coming from?
That was, under
of the-
task 1, it was one of the latter options that was set up where we would do away with the development rights altogether and instead just go based on a model to do the 2.5 minimum lot acre size.
Try like page
And so then
10.
it just indicated that the density rate would increase 4 times if we selected that as an option. It's page 9 of 13, and I believe it's option, or it's labeled number 5.
Did you skip that page?
Is that our page number?
So it was in the council, it was in the council.
I've been out of town till last night, so like,
I gotta give you grief.
I read it.
It's pages
Okay,
7
thank you.
through 9 have the options.
I see it now.
Sorry.
Chatty. I'd never do that.
I know you don't.
No. So Natalie was trying to get a number out. No one could hear. What, could you say that again, Natalie?
So what she's referencing is the report that went to council on April 25th, where we outlined the different options that we could explore. And at that time, the direction was to memorialize the development rights, at least for the draft, and then move forward with the survey to explore those options further.
I think, I'm gonna say, I love our development rights program. And it's been here for
A while.
50 years and has gone through 20 election cycles. And we're different, and I think it's good. I think it's different in a profoundly good way. It's an option, but it would be a hill I'd die on. But I don't think we're gonna go that direction anyway, so we don't need to have that big of a discussion. But for now, I'll just say, that's not gonna work for me.
I would agree. I'm on option 1 on page 7, just clarifying the code to continue to apply as we have been.
You know.
And I'm open to listening to the survey before I make my decision in which direction I go.
I think any major changes, it would have to be something, we'd have
Yep.
to have a ton of feedback to do something that massive, because like you said, it's been here forever. It is unique. I don't know that I ever could have come up with that system, but it seems to work, and it definitely makes us unique.
Better. Not just unique,
Yeah.
better.
It was in the 80s when it got implemented.
82, I don't
I thought it
know.
I
was
believe it
later.
was 1981. where it
Was it 81? Holy
Yeah.
cow.
So we'll call George. He probably
Yeah.
knows the day.
Dean had just retired.
Woo, now
First time.
the gloves are off now. Here we go. Jesus. 81, I was 19 years old.
I wasn't even born yet. I was negative 10.
Ouch.
Okay, on to then task number 2. The numbers, thank you Natalie for getting that together. That,
Actually, it was Dwight, just to be
thank you
clear.
Dwight for,
Yes.
it's online, Dwight,
He'll see
for
it.
getting that together. That was, I had an inkling we were higher than most, I didn't know it was that much.
Higher than combined, is that
So
what you said?
it was, I put this forward as a moratorium. And is there a possible way to say no more until further notice?
It'd be removing it from your.
Removing them from the use.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is what the drafts right now would do that.
Do we have to vote for that, or how do we do that?
Not
If you want
tonight,
me
but
to
yeah.
move forward with a public hearing in July with the first task 2, we can.
I don't think
certainly move
anyone's
forward with that.
opposed to that. It's not a long discussion, I don't think, but
Yeah, if we're ready. I think it would have been longer if we were gonna try to look at standards to add, to try to limit where it could go.
we don't want to be the town where people store their crap.
Exclusively,
We
yeah.
already are.
Yeah.
I hate to tell you.
Well,
that's what
we
are.
had
have a
some,
lot.
we did some stuff over the last 6 years to clean up a little bit, but yeah, officially. There's a difference between
Yeah, there's-
unofficially storing your stuff.
There's the number of people that
What did you,
are.
what did you, oh, yeah, yeah,
They
so,
got a pole
I don't
shed
think you're
right
gonna-
in my pole shed.
I don't think you're gonna get too much opposition there.
I get people come down my driveway all the time. You got place to store my boat?
Well, we, like 6 years ago, we just went through some tuning up of the ordinances of people getting semi-truck trailers out of their front yard. And so we're moving towards not unofficially allowing, and then now we're moving towards like officially disallowing it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
We can have a discussion, but I think we're all on board with
I
disallowing
think-
that
I
as
think
a,
that makes sense with where we are, and if it changes in
Larger-
the future as more of the city is developable a
Larger
long
lot
time down the
sizes.
road, then it would just be a change to add it in somewhere. At that
yeah, that's
future
pretty good
council, but-
research. We have all those,
Yeah,
not interest.
it's telling.
We've done our duty.
Yeah.
Larger
regional
lot
storage.
sizes would let somebody store their motor home on the side of their garage and then.
We just gotta be, I'm telling you, like, we gotta be tight on that stuff, because this can be a beautiful suburb. And you travel anywhere, and there are a lot of, it's like a place this far out the metro can go one of 2 directions. It can be like a place where people are like, wow, that is amazing, I wanna live there. Or it can be like,
Total opposite.
any car that has entered that city has never left, because they're all in everyone's yard. Like, we have to make that distinction, and
Yep. No, I think we're all generally on the same page on,
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is mini storage and self-storage, so
Yes.
it doesn't get rid of like accessory exterior storage for a
Correct.
business. And we do have rules.
we have code.
We do have code, that we require, you can't put up an accessory structure before a house, because part of the, people would put up pole barns that they would use for storage, so that helps with how we handle residential properties. So that's already in code. And then, we do allow for some parking of RVs on your property
Yeah.
to kind of offset the need for a storage unit.
But
and-
you can't do that with a 7.5 foot side yard.
no,
Right.
Well, you
it's
guys
more outside the municipal.
I'm
Redefine the
just
side yard as, I wanted the yard to be anywhere abutting a road, but I got
think we
outvoted on that.
recently updated it though, so that even people in Ravinia, if it didn't, or not necessarily Ravinia, that might not be a great example, but newer developments could have it in the front yard as long as it met the 25-foot setback, and didn't violate an HOA.
That's what I was gonna say, is the HOA is not gonna, they're gonna be more restricted
Yeah.
than the city at this point in time.
I'd rather have the city
Maybe
be,
a limit, an hour limit
Yeah.
for how long you can have it parked
Yeah.
outside your house.
I don't wanna rely on the HOA for keeping our town nice. So I'd rather, is there a way that we can match not match, but kinda match the HOA so we don't rely on the HOA to keep our,
I would not wanna match the HOA.
no, I know, like, we're not gonna go in there and,
Storage in there.
I lived in a HOA and I moved out. I don't like HOAs. People move to Corcoran to get out of those, but like to have some stricter, like I don't wanna rely on HOAs for not having RVs in people's front yards.
But we changed it recently. That was direction from council to allow RVs in the front yard as long as it met the front setbacks. That was a recent change from this council.
6:03 p.m.
Because there were quite a few people that were upset that they couldn't store their RV in their driveway. And so we went ahead and changed that.
Yeah, and I don't think it's as much
Because there's
people in like a
bigger than
Ravinia
the
or
house.
Bellwether, it's more,
If you've got
maybe it could be
100-foot long driveway.
within the MUSA, but an existing home.
Yeah, a little bit
Yeah, so
of
we didn't discriminate. The rules just front
Right.
setback.
If you
And
could
then-
make it work in
And then
Ravinia,
the
you
HOA
could
can
wheels
say that
parked
you can't
outside.
store it in your driveway is
Don't-
basically the
the dog
additional
don't
layer
hunt.
that.
Is there a requirement to have it on like a certain surface, like I know
Yes.
local road, that's.
Yes, yeah, it has to be on an approved surface, yes.
Yeah. But that's also kind of a separate storage topic.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, because I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page, that
Yep.
the direction would be to move forward with a public hearing in July that removes self-storage and mini storage from the 2 districts that's currently allowed in.
We should do more of these, cause I feel like we should be on the same table all the time.
Well, at least half of them are talking with us, the other half are just sitting observing, so.
Doesn't,
Well, one's gonna be
whatever.
up here later.
Well, just give us time. Give
I-
Peter and Mark time.
I
I'm sure
give them
they'll
time,
chime in.
I'm calling them out now, so.
Okay, so yes, I think,
So item 2, I think task
Yep.
2 is done.
yep,
Yeah.
or that
It's
direction.
on the road to completion.
Yep,
Yeah.
and then task, so we have time,
Yes.
a little bit, not too much actually.
We've got tons of time. 6:45,
Oh, I
right?
was thinking 6:30.
Why do we end these at 6:30?
We
We
don't have
gotta
to.
sit and twiddle our thumbs
No,
till
we don't have
7?
to, I was just thinking.
That was
6:30.
Alan's fault, Alan always wanted to end
Yeah,
at
I
6:30.
think it was Alan's fault.
Gotta throw him under the
We gotta
bus.
spend every minute.
Throw
We're gonna
them
be
on
together.
here, you know?
It does
I
allow
think we
us
were
to-
over budget in like 1992, I'm pretty sure that was Alan's fault.
Yeah, allows us to take down the tables and go.
There's no reason. That's one thing that bothers me about these things is we have a half an hour to just sit.
Yeah, well, let's
Keep going.
keep going, keep going. Item 3, so Natalie, could you give us a summary again on
Yeah,
that
so
one?
task 3 is a comprehensive update. Right now, the scope that has been identified by council for this update was specific to the district uses, potentially simplifying the table where it makes sense, where do we not call out uses that should be added, and what uses do we kind of want to pull out in terms of adding some additional standards to. So the table of uses is at the back, the last 5 pages of the packet. The planning commission had intended to look at the first page at our last meeting, but we called the meeting short due to a lack of facilities. And so the intent, if we didn't get to it today, was for the planning commission to look at the first 2 pages at our next meeting in June. But if we wanted to start kind of tackling some of that now as a group, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, I think if there's any initial thoughts we want to get out, and then still have planning do it, and then it'll come back to us.
I had a few.
Go for it.
Looking at senior dwellings on
Page, or are there enough
page-
page numbers are
sorry, in the PDF, it's page 40,
there? Okay, what's like the top,
table of uses.
and what's the
It's
first use?
Second table of uses.
Okay,
First one is conditional home occupation.
gotcha.
So senior dwelling is toward the bottom. It's only permitted in DMU currently. I feel like that would make equal sense in general mixed use. I don't know why you would want to confine that only to downtown.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I don't think that senior dwellings are specifically prohibited in any of our districts, but we specifically call it out in one district. So I think it's an area where, why are we calling it out separately? I think a difference between an assisted living facility and a senior, there's a huge difference between an age-restricted home versus assisted living facility that requires staffing. So I think it makes sense to pull those two out, but maybe we just even remove the senior dwelling
Just treat it as a
altogether.
dwelling?
Yeah, it's just dwelling.
That makes sense
So I
to
think
me.
that's an area where we could stand for some simplification.
Okay. And then the other one that jumped out to me was drugstores are only permitted in C2. It seems to me that could make sense in a DMU, GMU as well. Maybe even neighborhood commercial, you often see those in a transition space to a neighborhood in C1. I would remove the recycling center. I don't think that was on this page, though.
No, I
And-
had that same one.
I would add ghost kitchen somewhere in here.
Ghost kitchen?
Have you heard of these? So it's like a restaurant, but there's no seating. It's a restaurant only for delivery service. And sometimes what they'll do is have a larger commercial kitchen that they'll rent out bays to different concepts. So it's a nice way to start a small business. There's not a lot of footprint. There's not a lot of employees. You don't have to manage
Yeah.
setting up
And
a
where
dining room.
were you thinking that?
I don't know exactly. I think it could belong in a lot of places. It doesn't necessarily have to just be in a commercial because you don't need resident parking or user parking.
I just saw a couple of these as incubators that started when I was still working in Shakopee, that they were then able to create enough of a customer base to essentially move to a brick and mortar.
Yeah.
So I do think it's an interesting creative solution as we're trying to grow something like that, because it's lower risk.
Right.
So without all the overhead of having to buy all of the service materials, tables, and all that other stuff, you start to create, it's a lot like another good solution that worked was food trucks. So it's like food trucks in a brick and mortar.
Yeah.
Don't we have a case tonight about that? Having slightly less,
It's not technically a ghost kitchen
No,
because it's a
yeah.
specific user.
I'm talking about on the 30 and 19, where it's slightly less than what we're looking for, but like an incubator of some kind.
I'm failing to make the connection to the ghost kitchen, so if you could.
Oh, no, it has nothing to do with the
Okay.
kitchens.
Yeah.
I'm talking about incubation. No, they haven't talked about the kitchens.
They start raising chickens.
So the farmer's market stuff, like it's in 2 zones. It's not a big deal, but probably it could fit in some of the other ones.
Okay.
Too big of a bite of a chip there, sorry.
Once
Um,
council's finished.
Was that?
I said, once you're finished, I have one.
Oh, go for it, go for it.
No, please.
I was just thinking, so,
I just have a question around drive-throughs and like restaurants and cafes with drive-throughs. And this is on, I don't know, once you get to the Rs. Do we particularly allow drive-throughs in certain zones? Or I know we call out, so I'm wondering if they're.
Drive-throughs are typically a conditional use permit in all districts. I think any place that we allow a restaurant, for the most part, there's the option to get a conditional use permit for the drive-through.
Okay.
It's pretty typical for cities to have it be a conditional use permit because some sites are really not going to allow for proper stacking. And so you want to have some control over the site that it would go into.
Yeah.
Stacking, screening, lights,
Yeah.
sound,
It's gonna-
all that. Didn't we have that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
You
gonna be
talked
better on
about
some
that a
sites
lot
than
a
others.
couple
I
of
don't
years
know that
ago.
we'd be opposed to it in a lot of cases, but sometimes you might need an extra layer of scrutiny and maybe some added
Absolutely.
conditions and stuff like that,
Security.
yeah.
So I don't know why, it might be that it's separated out on here. I think drive-through lanes, drive-through businesses. And so part of it too, if we actually wanted to do a use table, part of the reason why this is so clunky is because we call out uses differently in different districts. And so if we wanted to do an actual table of uses, which some city codes do, to make it a little easier to navigate, we would compile, like drive-throughs would just be one category, we wouldn't have two different categories for drive-throughs.
Oh, I see it now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's some minor ones that I wasn't even sure, I just kind of put a question mark add on. I mean, just expanding some of the ones like hardware stores, would we want that in any of the other commercial or mixed use type zones?
Or, to that point, why do we feel the need to specifically call out hardware stores? Wouldn't that be retail? Is there a reason
Yeah.
why we want to have it specifically called out in some areas? I think the same question is a similar question is how we handle butcher shops. I think that one, there could be depending on where we want to locate it, there could be some additional impacts that need to be considered for a butcher shop. But so maybe that one does get called out separately, but for where are there uses that would just be considered retail and allow for flexibility for that category to respond.
If a hardware store were to come in and they started rentals and stuff and outside storage and all those kind of things, that's where I was thinking when
Sure.
I saw hardware stores, we would want something to protect neighbors and obviously help the business do things. So.
Yes, no, that's valid. That's a valid use that you don't see with every.
I just
every
out
store.
here,
Yeah.
would we see it? Ton of business,
Yeah.
or
Someday.
folks down on 19 and 55, huge rental portion of their business and such. So Highway 55 rental, all those things. There's.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think a hardware store, because I guess I'm thinking of like the little mom and pop hardware
Yeah.
store that's in the strip mall. But to your point, that would also apply to a Home Depot or Menards that.
I'm
yeah.
Or
thinking.
Fleet Farm.
Yeah, Fleet Farm that has. a
I'm not
rental
thinking that big,
component,
I'm thinking, I'd love to have one of those come, if anybody's listening,
Yeah, Fleet Farm.
but a true value,
Yeah.
any of those hardware Hank, those kind of things,
Just need a
Sure.
Fleet Farm.
so.
Covers everything, right? Man mall.
And what kind of butcher shop?
I'd never leave town.
That was 50
Is it a hoof butcher shop or is it a Von Hansen's where they're doing clean? So are we bringing live animals
Locker
and taking
plant.
them from who? Yeah, so that could, you might not want that next to McDonald's, but
Fresh hamburgers.
yeah,
I'm telling you.
Just saying.
but very different experiences there if they're back in the
Yep.
live animal trailer up to the butcher shop versus I'm going in to get my ribeyes for the weekend.
Best reconnection to where your food really comes from.
That's
that
true.
you could possibly ever have. But no, I was gonna say the same thing, and some of that is just dependent on, if the butcher, chooses to be like a USDA grade, some of that is on the business they wanna start, but if we as a city distinguished where we would accept, a slaughter as well as, processing.
Right. Like at Center Cut and Rogers, it's not like, if there was a McDonald's next door, I wouldn't make, I'd go to both, I wouldn't be
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, there's raw meat over there, I'm not going to that McDonald's, but it just depends on the facility. I do have a question,
Just higher quality meat over there.
yeah, there's so like, for example, I think we could parse this like crazy. Like a museum is only allowed in two different areas. And I wouldn't probably object to a museum in most areas, depending on the museum. But somebody could come in here and say, hey, I want to put a museum in a rural commercial area. And they could apply and still get their museum. These are just things that you don't even have to ask for, just automatically.
Right.
So it's not as if we would never allow it, it's just per code
This is what
and
can go in there too.
ask for permission to do.
Yeah, so you'd be looking at a zoning ordinance amendment. So I think it's helpful to think of what are the most common uses that we encounter, that we anticipate in this area.
Yeah.
To try to figure out, does do they need to be conditional uses? Are we okay with some things moving to a permitted use? Or are we okay with all of our permitted uses? Does something actually need to get moved to a conditional use category? I think that would be helpful. But yeah, to your point, if someone wanted to do a museum in the rural commercial that propose a museum on our agricultural roots, then they would come and ask for a zoning ordinance amendment, and we'd be able to evaluate it that way.
So if we wanted to have these be more restrictive and have people ask, we could just have it be that way, I guess. I'm not objecting to, the only objection I would have is if there's a standard that they could come in and put something where we don't want it and we couldn't do anything about it. I'd rather lean towards being more restrictive and ask for permission than be less restrictive and say, oh my God, I can't believe we allowed that in that area.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's God
Sounds
agreeing
like
with
he
me.
agrees.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Oh, I just have a quick question. So back to the hardware store. So like, the way that this is laid out right now, it's sort of layered, right? Because you can have like a hardware store qualifies as a retail store, but then if you're talking a hardware store with outdoor storage, you have a whole separate category that says outdoor storage as an accessory to an allowed use. So when layered like that, what is, like, it's whatever one is most, like, which one wins? Like,
Right, so for a hardware store, since it's permitted in C2, they would go, what they would do is they would have to provide us with a site plan. And the site plan has to meet all of our standards, and then it must be approved by the council. So if they had an exterior storage component, then that part of the request would be approved by the CUP. So you could theoretically approve the site plan without approving the CUP, or you could add additional standards as part of the CUP.
but when it seems like, so like, I guess what I was, and maybe that was a bad example, but like when you have, when you call out one request, but then tagged onto that application, it actually falls under 2 of the types here. It wouldn't ever, like, one would, I'm just struggling to find the words, but like, let's say it's an allowed use, for instance, in the C1, the addendum to that application is an allowed use in, I1 or whatever, but not in C1. Because the default would fall to whatever zoning it is that they're actually, like, the land falls to.
Correct,
Okay.
yes. So there are going to be uses in the I1 that are not going to be in the C1.
And so it's always going to have a layered element to it,
Yes.
no matter what, like, even after we redo it, right?
Yeah, there's always going to be some uses allowed in some districts over others, if that's what you're saying.
That could be combined into one
I think I
application.
may have misunderstood that part. So it's always going to default to the zoning.
The zoning.
Yeah, so if a parcel is zoned for C2, and they want to put in a funeral home for C2, but then they wanted to do an exterior storage component that's only allowed in I1, something like that.
Yep,
They would not be able to do that.
Okay.
The only way forward to be able to do that would be a zoning ordinance amendment at that point.
gotcha. Okay, that's.
Yeah, but if but typically there's an exterior storage CUP for some use, like you can, in the I1, there's limited exterior storage that you can have. So typically you see those uses going into an industrial area for the most part anyways.
So like if a fleet farm with exterior storage and exterior, maybe even retail, like they have some of the flower stuff outside, where would that go?
So we allow,
They're gonna go Trailhaven
Business
and
park on the
Oakdale.
corner.
Trailhaven
it
and
wouldn't go to
Oakdale.
business.
It wouldn't, but I think that might not be a bad idea.
So it doesn't go to business park, but so it would go to retail goods. It's a great question. So it's a big box store, so it would not go in C1, because C1 is supposed to be smaller stores and your retail uses are capped as a specific square foot. So I believe it'd be C2. As far as the exterior storage,
So it's very hypothetical.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I got
But
too
it
much
is
going on.
driving at the point, my question is, it does seem to have this, like, yes, and so then,
You
that's
meet
what I.
this piece, you meet this piece, we can bring those pieces together.
Yeah,
in your application
With a PUD.
with a PUD.
Well,
All these trigger PUDs.
So straightforward.
So the exterior storage, I think we do have it as an interim use. I'm not seeing it on the table, but I believe as an interim use, you can do some outdoor sales. So if they truly had permanent outdoor sales that weren't covered by an interim use permit, we would be talking about a code change. As far as something that had rental vehicles parked,
That's different.
I think that could just
Yeah.
fall as part of their parking lot. I don't think that, because they'd be moving regularly. So I think that it would just be, just dedicated as part of their parking lot. It wouldn't necessarily be an additional use.
Well, haven't we run into problems with, this is sidetracked a little bit, but with some of the repair facilities inside our commercial district where we run into the definition of if the vehicles move every once in a while, like is it storage or is it,
Yeah.
and so like, we run into gray all the time. You and I have been back there before. But I also would lean on having slightly more complicated codes,
Okay.
just because then we can be a little more selective as to what we want. But that's just me. I don't know. I'm on council now, so I'd love to have a say. Maybe if I'm not on council, I'd be like, have a different viewpoint. But I think we want to be more selective as a town rather than just have an open architecture to having people do whatever they want.
I agree.
To that point, I think a particular passionate issue for some, and maybe it's covered under just like general retail, but like dispensaries.
Oh my
I just sent her a note, that's so funny.
We're gonna have
I
to be
literally just
tackling
passed
that soon.
Natalie a note, asking
Yeah,
that very question.
I don't see that on here.
Great
And then I
question.
was also thinking,
Are you passionately for or against dispensaries?
more against than for.
Okay. 'Cause we,
But I
we,
am a millennial, so I'm probably more open-minded than others.
I don't know, we've talked about it a lot.
I've been at the meetings when it's been talked about.
We can't always decide that on city though.
Yeah, there's
With
some-
the
there's some
dispensary
higher
laws are
authority.
so.
I
they
could see it getting out of hand if you just like can't turn them away, right?
It's out of
Unless
hand. It's
right.
already out of hand.
And then the other thing I didn't see on here was.
I didn't mean to
like,
put you on the
event-
spot.
No, not at all. Event venue, wedding venue.
So,
There's another one.
as far as the wedding, so keep in mind, this doesn't show our residential districts, so,
yes.
our urban reserve and our rural residential do allow for event centers where that could be used as a wedding venue, as a event center, that would be the, I believe it's an IUP approval.
It is.
Yeah, and then, I do think there may be some incoming discussions on, adding agribusinesses in our rural residential as well.
Yep.
That would allow for things like the,
Farm to table. Yes.
potentially, or some kind of, like, having apple picking on site, just allowing, making sure that that's clearly an allowed occupation on agricultural land, and then, we're starting to see some smaller land that's not technically agriculture in terms of how our zoning ordinance defines it, but they're using it for production of grapes for wine. So how can we encourage, because that is something that's still uniquely, and even though it's not on 10 acres, it's
And then they gotta get an alcohol permit too.
Right?
yeah, but.
Well, sometimes. Well, yeah, you're right, they do.
But yeah, I think that's a slightly different discussion what's in front of us now, because it's more, that's what's happening in more of our rural residential area than it is in our commercial area, but I do think that those conversations are important to have and may even be incoming or in terms of a potential application, so.
Yeah, because I was thinking about the Rogers Event Center, you
Okay.
know?
Mhm.
Might technically be residential, but it feels like it's like right kind of in there downtown.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
right there. It's not a barn venue,
Mhm.
it's more corporate-y, right? But, I mean, we could get a proposal like that.
I think too, like, as we move forward as a town, sometimes maybe we want to loosen the restrictions on things like agribusiness. Just like there are some towns that have decided we want to have breweries. Like, we don't have any
Yeah.
breweries in
No,
Corcoran.
but we
That you
have-
know.
And there are,
They're in about every district allowable.
yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
if you make it easier to have a certain business in our town, we might attract those kind of businesses. So if we're like, if you wanna put a apple cider place where people can come and tour and stuff, that's cool. If you wanna put a winery, that's cool. And make it less restrictive to do the things that we want it, like we want to have done, and make our town geared towards that kind of thing, then maybe we tune the code to like really encourage that, and then discourage like 3-story storage units with semi-trucks that come every day. Like maybe we don't want that, so we make it a little harder to have that kind of facility, but easier to do agribusiness.
Absolutely.
When you're talking about dispensaries, we also have to think about cannabis farming, which we have more land and so when you talk agribusiness,
I think that's gonna
we're
be
a
a big
prime target for a lot of folks that are thinking about cannabis farming. And we're gonna have to make some decisions about where the city stands on that. How do you
I think we'll have
manage
more
it?
potential places wanting to do that than dispensaries.
Yeah, it's crazy,
concur.
even for me, I don't know if you get that or you get that, but for me, people reaching out and wanted to grow cannabis on,
We've had some
it's,
areas
there's a lot
here
of people that wanna do
planted
that.
2 or 3 years ago.
It is allowed under cottage food law right now
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
state of Minnesota. And so I don't know, beyond saying where we permit it, I don't know what we as a city can do.
Right, but just as, when you talk about you're creating an environment
Yeah.
that fosters a
Sure.
desire pretty soon, what happens if we become known as the community where everybody grows pot?
Yeah, then
And you can store your
trespassing
RV,
become,
and you can
trespassing
store your
becomes
RV.
an issue.
Well, I mean,
Random RVs
part
become
of it
issues.
is layered, right? Because to get a food license so that you could directly grow and then sell to consumer is super cumbersome through the county and through the state. And so, you know, if there's ever an opportunity to advocate for making it easier for small to medium farmers to be able to, you know, get access to those food license and not be under the same regulations as large CAFOs and large operations, then that's the opportunity that then we can encourage those individuals to be able to use their land for growing, you know, chicken and turkeys and hogs instead of cannabis.
That leads to another question, I don't know, is there ever a size component to this? Like a way to, yes.
Yeah, we can certainly add size.
Yeah, because it's like, how do we foster more of a local hardware store than a big box?
Yeah, so
Or
we-
a local bakery than a,
Yeah, we have retail, so typically, sometimes the problem with the size constraint is you can realize too late that it's super arbitrary and now you're putting someone through a zoning ordinance amendment. For example, we were speaking with someone looking at an existing site that wanted to do a CrossFit center. And we allow for recreational facilities under so many square feet in that district. And it seems arbitrary, like why wouldn't we allow it for an additional 3,000 feet? So sometimes it's like you don't really realize how arbitrary those size limits become. However, it's not unusual to see some kind of size component to try to limit, particularly like retail stores, because
Yeah, 'cause then you
to
get
try to
very
avoid a
different
big
types
box
of
store.
stores, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like
Right.
that's okay in C2, but not C1. So it's not unusual, it's just you want to also be mindful of making sure the limit furthers our interest without being too limiting, just because approval processes can be grueling as it is. And especially if they're already going to have to apply for a conditional use permit, then why are we worried about the size limit? Because that's something that we could control as part of the CUP. So it's just an example.
I like what you're saying there. I would suggest we also combine health clubs and fitness centers with the health clubs and fitness centers less than 5,000 square feet. And just make it one without a size limit, because in the C1, we already have 50,000 square foot limit overall, I believe, which would prevent it from getting too oversized.
And we have things like impervious surface limits too, that I think helps to kind of constrain
Yeah.
some of that as well. But,
And I would maybe add it to C2 as an option as well.
sure.
I think one of the challenges becomes if it hasn't been developed ever. So if we're talking about a lot of these parcels that need infrastructure, it is too expensive for small businesses to front the bill on all of that. And so that would be my only, I think that's why you see sort of this trend where all of a sudden what moves in first to a community is all the big box. And then when people are tired of that, then they leave, and then all of a sudden you see the small business come back, because now the building is there, right? The water's been put in, the road is been done, all they have to do is come back to the business. And so if there's a way we could, I mean, this is, you asked it once before, is there any way to help with that financing options, right, for some of those small businesses? I know that's a nightmare, like I see the looks being exchanged, right? But I just would hate to have fewer applicants for things because we've put a size limit on it, and then now the cost of implementing is beyond the reach of a wider variety of people. That's the only flip side to that, I guess.
I don't think we need to put size restrictions on those, because most of those small mom and pop stores, the True Values Hardware, Hanks, if we're talking hardware, they already have a footprint in mind. They're looking for a certain size parcel, those kind of things. It's kind of a
Self-policing?
they're managing it on their own and looking for properties like that. So I don't know if we want to put that much into this. One thing that I was messing when somebody said funeral home, we had a nightmare from my previous experience and stuff. We don't have crematories. Funeral homes, cremation type deals, there was one
Just says
in a
funeral.
neighboring community. Has that been limited to where they can go? Do we need to consider something like that?
Funeral homes and mortuaries in C2 is a permitted use.
But that's not a crematorium. That's not cremation.
No. no, I
So
don't
they can have a blast furnace in there and do whatever they want in those? Is that the way it was? Because what I
Less
remember.
byproduct too,
Huh?
less byproduct.
Well, yeah,
Just-
Where it
I
was
mean,
before-
Seriously, when you're talking, what you're gonna need the infrastructure in order to deal with, a crematorium doesn't need to deal with all those other chemical residuals and all that other stuff. It's cleaner.
But it was a event because it was within 750 feet of a neighborhood, and people were worried about the fallout from the exhaust.
I
It
live
just
right
turned
across
into a-
Fish Lake from the place you're talking about.
Well, there was another one
Oh,
that didn't go in over by Walmart, so.
Maybe we don't want to be the whole
I'm
other
asking
crematoriums.
about that, just, your tables are frickin' complete, unbelievable, but when somebody said that, that nightmare came up in my mind. And
Yeah, I don't see that crematory is anywhere in our uses, and if it's not specifically called out, it is assumed to be excluded.
that's not considered like a recreational fire or anything like that.
Nope,
We
not.
have burn permits.
I make light of
Let's
it,
talk with
but
police on how they
it's
turn
a
it
serious
around.
conversation, so.
Well, so like, Corcoran Pet Care will cremate
They
their
send them
animals, but I
away
think
on
they
site.
send them
They
away,
send
don't
them
they?
away.
So one thing, Corinne, to your point about, we run into problems with paying, like how do we differentiate who we help and who we don't? It's always a huge problem, like what's small, what's big. So like, obviously, I think we'd rather have small than big. For anyone watching, like the 15 of us we have a blank slate, and we're trying to come up with something to make, we're playing SimCity with
We
our
are.
town, and
We
it's
are.
so hard to have it be right. And so man, I would challenge anyone who gets frustrated with how our town ends up, or where it's going, or whatever, come sit here, because we have 15 people who are pretty smart, and it's so damn tough to figure out where we want to be in 15 years. This is an impossible conversation. It's awesome though, because we have people passionate about it, but this is so
It's tough.
challenging.
It is tough. A map of.
Well, I just was gonna say, if we wanna look at, or maybe it's in the packet, but,
What would
I
you
just
the
didn't-
zoning map?
just to be
or-
able to see where these different.
Yeah, I can pull up the zoning map, 1 second.
Did it get messed with when?
Where is
there we go.
breweries listed? Is breweries listed somewhere?
Um,
Not there, I see it. Or distilleries?
I think it's listed under.
There's no brewery or bar under those words.
Natalie brought
No,
them
it's like
up. Did you
liquor
bring them
on
up at
sale,
some
on
point?
sale.
No, there was
Yeah.
something else. It was like pub or
Tavern is listed.
Tavern,
There
okay,
you
that's
go.
what I think it is, yeah.
Would that be the same?
No.
Not quite.
Tavern distributes, brewery creates.
Taverns,
And
you're
distillery.
right.
Yeah.
yeah.
So we don't even have it?
Yeah, so we would need to specifically call it out if we wanted to allow breweries.
We're like 10 years late on that trend.
Listen, good call.
Now they're closing, not opening.
That's true.
It is, but I thought we had.
I thought we did too.
I thought we talked about this like
Yeah.
3 years ago.
I'm not
Yeah.
finding it.
Yeah.
Maybe cidery is also on the list.
Cidery?
Are those the same?
No, I think that, it might be slightly different, but I think the function is similar. I was trying to see if I could pull my city. But, to your point,
I do too.
this
I
make jelly
zoning
and
map.
Thank you, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Oh.
So as
Just
far
so
as where
that-
the districts are located, this purple is our light industrial, so I have that right here, right here, and down on 55, we have a couple of light industrial. Like the old Napa site is part of our C1 area. We have one other property that's randomly zoned C1 up here, the rest is C2, so it's a slightly larger car-friendly commercial area. And then we also have some C2 again down on 55. And then we have our downtown mixed use right here, and then our general mixed use is on the 30 corridor with a little bit up on the steep property as well. That's where all the commercial districts are.
There's some.
Are some of the terminologies just out to date, like out of date? Okay, because like at nursing home, like I don't think we, rarely are they ever called that any longer.
Yeah, so the last time we had a comprehensive update, to my understanding, was in about 2003. So it's about 20 years out of date.
Okay, and so when we're saying nursing home, what we're in effect meaning is anything that has staff.
I believe so, like assisted living,
Memory care.
similar, I could do a little bit more digging to see if there is.
We have like
other-
assisted living facility.
Yeah, so again, the reason why, part of the reason why we have uses that change across each district is because we call out uses in each district.
Right.
The way you avoid that in other cities is just to do a use table so that the uses are uniform throughout the district, so you don't have those weird discrepancies, like, well, why do we allow nursing homes here, but not here, but we allow memory care here? What is the difference that we're trying to call out between the two? So it's, so if we wanted to move towards a table of uses as a part of our code, then that's certainly something to help kind of clean it up.
And just for my understanding, I apologize if I'm slow, but a table of usage basically calls out the zoning and then says what's permissible in that zone.
Yeah, but then
So
usually
it's the opposite of this, rather than calling out a use and saying where it's
Careful.
permissible.
Good one. That's the one that can take down a
Yeah,
plan.
and so typically
hit
a
Michelle
code would
and
have
Lindsay.
one that's for residential districts and then have one that's
You
for
heard somebody.
districts, or in commercial and
And
industrial.
okay.
Let's get Jeremy's name on it, so.
Would ours then still call out
Cheddar.
downtown mixed use and downtown mixed use?
We're getting the hook. We
That's
got
a
a couple
great
minutes left to
question.
wrap
Did they
up.
officially end at 6:45? Did
It
they?
makes sense to have those separate.
I think staff would like it just so we can turn over and get it.
Okay.
It actually is scheduled 5:30 to 6:30, but in recognition of your desire to continue the discussion.
And residential.
Okay.
I move to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
If I can say something,
Can we have 1 minute to wrap?
him and I have been talking to, and we can't get enough input from the planning commission, parks, and the citizens of our town. We cannot get enough.
Yeah, anyone
So,
watching?
a formal meeting like this is great, but it would be nice to see some of these suggestions and stuff. If you've got something that comes out of the planning commission, come give it to Natalie, get it to the council, and get our input back kind of deal, instead of
Yeah.
something quite as organized, not quite as organized as this.
We don't have to
Just- there's a
wait for
ton of
this,
good-
this long to have your
Right.
input on these
Right.
things. I found this to be super valuable, just listening to what you guys have to say.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, guys.
That's what I have to say.
Thank
Well done, Lindsay.
You
Well
got
done,
another,
Corinne.
you got another minute to wrap up, John?
Thank you for the
You're
input.
done.
You spoke
Okay,
for me.
then,
Alright.
Jeremy, do we have a motion?
Second,
Second. All those in favor say aye.
if
Aye.
it's official, aye.
Nay.
We're
Nobody
adjourned
cares,
still.
yeah.